Tonight is a special night for any of us who have kids, plan on having kids, have nieces, have nephews, have people who are young people, or know people who have young people who are important to you. We have an expert in our group, one of our warriors, Isaiah McPeak, has been working for how many years he's been working on this to make it so you have like this mastery working with psychologists and experts and people in the field for social media and how it affects kids.
Yeah, it's probably four.
About 4 years. We got 4 years. And how is this affecting kids? How can we protect our children from the onslaught of algorithms and all the things that are going on to make it so our kids are constantly bombarded by information that it seems like, as the guinea pig parents, we don't have any real way to shield them or stop them from. So, what are we supposed to do? How do we help our kids have the best chance of success? And try and give ourselves at least some semblance of an idea of sanity in this world that is trying to make our kids fall into all of these pitfalls of information that we need to safeguard them in some way, shape, or from. So I'm going to ask all of us to be muted. I'll be muting like crazy. And then Isaiah, you're going to get the floor because this is your show today, bro. And I'm very, very excited about it. So without further ado, here's our expert, Isaiah McPeak.
Cool. Thanks, Rick. That was sweet. Hi, everyone. I'll tell you some stories, and then I'm going to ask you some questions, and then we're going to help. So the first story is I started a kid phone with a guy named Dane Whitbeck about 4 years ago. It's called Pinwheel, pinwheel.com. This is not an ad for Pinwheel. That is just a product, and it hits a product at a very precise age and time that is not right for most issues. So doing that, though, I got to meet with and talk to the author of Hooked, Nir Eyal. He wrote the playbook that Silicon Valley uses to hit the same cycles in our brain that junkies feel, drawing them back to the same thing again and again. And in fact, I could show you some of the model. It's a really interesting model to understand and deconstruct, because just like a belief system, if you notice you're being hooked, you can take a exit and go unhooked. So I'll show you that model here in a second. He also wrote a kind of apology for that, because he was just kind of doing some brain science work and did not know what would happen with that book. And so he actually wrote a sequel. It's called Indistractable, and it's about building your own resilience to distraction. So not about Nir Eyal being a villain, but I got to meet him. I got to meet the main therapist psychologist for Facebook, who sounds already like a villain, but actually they hired her precisely because she wrote this huge expose on everything Facebook and Instagram was doing wrong for kids. And they were like, that's interesting. And she told me some really cool stories about going in there, about how it's kind of weird to be around typically a data scientist, someone with a PhD, who's optimizing a system for clicks and uses, and they're not really thinking about what is the impact that those clicks or uses are having. And they're working 12, 14-hour days in this facility in Silicon Valley. And that for her, she started to see some of the human side of the decisions, and she felt it's less maniacal and more entropy, almost just the way things happen. So as someone who's built a lot of tech startups, I kind of dug into that a little bit. And here's what I found as the story that I tell. That's yes, there are predators out there trying to hook children's brains, but by and large, I don't think it's that. I think it's more like in World War II, the people who built the atom bomb were all in siloed rooms with information secrecy, and they didn't know they were building an atom bomb. They were solving this piece of the problem or that piece of the problem. And later it's like, yeah, we used all your amassed knowledge and built an atom bomb. A bunch of them are like, what? I had no freaking clue. That's not okay. I think it's more like that, because in the early days of the internet, the way to compete was through MAUs. That's how venture capitalists used to decide who do they invest in: monthly active users. And so there was this huge venture capital debate around that being one of the core metrics for how internet companies define their value. Somebody who has more MAUs and is increasing their MAUs has traction and is therefore sticky and is likely to be on a growth path and worthy of investment. So all these companies started researching, well, how do we increase active use? And that required them to dig into things like, what is active use? And each company came up with their own different term. In the earliest days, your Facebooks, your Salesforces, they decided, your YouTubes, they decided that monthly active use, active just means spending time there. So if we have people spending time here, then great, that is active use. And so they optimize and use a lot of these neural hacks to achieve that. And then something weird happened, which is we all got these devices in our hands, and all of a sudden we went from as kind of like exploring the United States of America. By the time that was done being explored, now there was like almost no unexplored land left in the world. Well, there's no additional use to be had pretty much. So a lot of the newer internet companies, they redefine active user, and they do very healthy things like, well, an active user is somebody who gets their goal done here again and again. Maybe their goal is to feel better or to listen to a song or to learn something. We're going to actually measure active users based on people who come back to us again and again to achieve similar goals instead of focusing on time. But you can see that's still the same thing. It's the same tactics. It's not maniacal, but if they're going to learn how to be the one that stands out of 50 other fitness apps, why do you go back to Monochrometer or whatever heck you use for tracking your diet instead of the next app for the same daggum thing? So they have to work really hard to capture your attention. So all that comes to what for me is sort of the core point here, which is this is a war for attention, and it's about how we pay attention. And you can moralize that if you want to, or you can stick with your Warrior's Way philosophy and accept that that's by and large a business decision, and most people implementing that business decision have zero understanding or moral charge to their utility of that understanding. They are just using your brain to make their paychecks come in by being the product that people use to do things that are by and large good. That body of knowledge has been found, used, and corrupted to do some bad things too. So we'll definitely own that. But at the end of the day, this is about attention, and it's about how your child pays attention, which means it's about how you pay attention. Attention is a topic that all of us can understand without being techno geeks. And so the first thing that I really like to help parents with is a freedom that, yeah, we're the pioneer generation. We've got to figure this out. And there's no playbook. We can't ask our parents for advice on that. You can't even ask your parents for advice on this subject. But you don't have to be a technical wizard either, because the issues at hand are not technical. These are not technology issues. These are about connection, attention, presence, skill, listening, competency, those sorts of things. And you know all about that. And so the best way to approach the phone questions is from your place of strength, which is your understanding of where your child is in areas of attention, connection, presence, and so on, and how technology and sports and their friends and their sleep schedule and their food is affecting those things. So just one other equation in parenting paradigm. You don't have to become a tech genius to do it. Okay, so to finish the story, the reason we started this company is, and we each had our own story. And Dane, my co-founder, was at a park, and he was over jogging around to the side where there was a kind of remote parking area. And his dad was berating the heck out of a 12-year-old. And it was like really nasty stuff. And all he was doing is he's running around because he had sold a company before. He's like, how can technology solve this problem? How can technology solve this problem? We've got to be able to have technology help with how parents interact with their kids, period. He called me and is like, hey, you know how It's really hard to figure out what kind of phone to give your kid. I'm like, damn straight I know, because just the night before, my 12-year-old, I guess she was 11, daughter at the time, we had our umpteenth debate about, is she going to get a phone? And I said the exact same thing. I'm like, flip phone over here. That doesn't solve the problem. That's not satisfying. Smartphone over there. That's not safe. It's not okay. And I don't have an answer, non-answer. So we decided to try and come up with an answer. The other guy that I really liked getting to know, Mike, somebody, hold on. Tech Generation is the name of his book. Really great book. Mike Brooks, he's here in Austin. And so I actually got to meet him and get him on our therapist council. And I built a therapist and counselor council to help us design a healthy kid phone. And the big thing that I learned from that is the principles that we put into that design have well-being at their core and goodness at their core. And so that's kind of what I want to share with you tonight, is some of those principles and some of that knowledge. Before I do that, I'd like to understand some of the reasons people are here on this call. Everything from cat's already out of the bag. My kid was caught doing XYZ. We gave up. We aren't giving them a phone yet. My kid does have a flip phone. Just if you could just in like 30 seconds or so, just give me the high level view of where you're at with kids and phones. I'd appreciate it.
I'll throw in on that one. We've already had a couple traps with our girls already, you know, and you already know me. Called it years before, Andrea. You already know they were trying to fight me on this one, but we've had one where our girl ran into the comparison curse, comparing herself with other women on Instagram and who she's supposed to look like and how she's supposed to be, and fell into a group that was highly pessimistic and also very emotionally damaging, and got into emotional cutting, got into like physical harming of herself, depression stuff, wanted to get onto medication because her friends were on medication, started falling into these comparison curse that was happening, that was heavily influenced by all these things that were on Instagram and things like this. And then we also had the obvious one that comes from Snapchat. And this would be the one where if you have an entire system that's designed to hide the evidence, it makes you feel bulletproof in doing wrong things. And so we've also had one who wanted to make her boyfriend happy by sending some naked pictures. So these were two things that were way too young for their bracket, but they have exposure to them. So we had to go the route of removing social media. Those were two of ours.
Yeah. I also want to add too to that. With one of our daughters that we've had to remove, we've removed all social media, but one of them is now currently making I said, if you want to have Instagram back, you have to give us 5 real good reasons on why you think that you need to have Instagram back. So she's currently working on that list. Rick and I know that's not, no matter what list she comes up with, it's still not going to be healthy for her. So I think that being able to have a safe place for kids to go, if that is even a thing on social media, would be helpful, where they feel like they have that social connection and we can feel safe about it, but then they also feel included, because I think that's a big part of this thing with our kids too, and social, like all my friends have it. So they want to be a part of something that their friends are, but we, like Rick said, can't allow it.
Thank you.
I got something to add. So we gave my son a phone, I think when he was right around 11 or so, and it was a smartphone, and my wife set it up with parental guidance on it, and she was able to see what he saw on his phone, kind of thing, and actually helped us realize that his actual biological father was taking him on drug deals. So that was like a huge thing, because if we didn't have that phone, we wouldn't have known, because we got to see the text messages and shit like that between him and his father, and also location, like where they were going. So there was no reason for him to be driving into like certain parts of Rhode Island per se, picking something up and then going. So with my son in the car, so that was awesome. An awesome way that we use the phone to kind of um, like find out, good information. So I guess she set it up to where she could look through and be like, oh, he's been looking at this on the internet, he's been doing this and that, and it was really informative for us.
Thank you.
And I know for me, the stage of work kind of as I've got a 13-year-old daughter that she's had a phone for about 4 or 5 years now, which wasn't necessarily by our choice. It was one that was given to her by her mom. And so we just kind of had to live with it and put restrictions on it and such. Currently, we have the Bark app on that phone and the Life 360 app as well for emergencies and such. But the only social media that she has at this point is Facebook. We've kept everything else very minimal, but she's getting to the point of wanting more different social apps to interact with more of her friends and such versus what she has access to on Facebook. So kind of like what Rick and Andrew had said, is we're kind of doing the whole thing of having her do a lot of research about the app and what is good, what is bad, how to avoid some of the bad, just basically making her write an essay on it to see what she can come up with and kind of determine things from there.
Thank you. By the way, we got the same investor backing us as backed Bark. So I got to meet Titania and a lot of the Bark people who go on TV with the Childhood 2.0 and things like that, and collaborate with them and see inside. And holy cow, y'all. There's the most amazing thing that they did. Bark is a teen, like it talks teen monitoring service. It doesn't actually give you access. It just tells you something happened that you should look into. And they have a lot of suicide prevention and different things like that. But they formed this strike team. And so they create standard girl Instagram profiles and wait to see how long until predators are coming and in what ways and approaches do they make. And it's like minutes. And then they're there. Really, really amazing stuff. And one of my top resource recommendations is watching the movie Childhood 2.0 with your kids. Really good stuff. Thanks, Chris. Who else?
One of the things that I find my son just watching, he could watch this stuff all day, is just if it's on an iPhone, iPad, or whatever, just YouTube and just the nonsense videos that, like Mr. Beast and stuff like that. And I always try to lead them into like getting something educational, like looking up survivals and, looking up, if he has questions about, any of the presidents or history and stuff like that. I always try to push him that way. And it always seems to kind of blow up in my face that he doesn't want to do it. So it's just the lack of a better term, the stupid YouTube videos that make no sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's kid doom scrolling, right? And then you watch it and you're like, this is literally some other kid opening toys. Oh my gosh. Yeah. Right. But there's a piece of that too, Rick, I'm putting an asterisk on here of like denial that the American kid dream is gone, right? When my kids ride bikes out in the neighborhood, how many other kids are out there riding bikes in the neighborhood? So they can't have the experience that most of us on this call had if we had a good one with like neighborhoods and friends and go play outside. In fact, you might have the cops called on you. And we can't deny that, right? As well, that they're in a tech world. And that is a hard balance to figure out. Real hard. Who's next?
If anybody's got like a concern for their kid or something in the future, because some of you have young ones, what are some of the concerns also that you're like, I just don't want to have to deal with this too?
Yeah, I guess I'll throw out there that besides our 13-year-old daughter, we also have 2 boys that are 2 and 5 that, of course, they don't have any smart devices or tablets or anything like that, but they do have, access to YouTube on the TV and YouTube videos and such like that, which that's all something that they can only watch on the family TV in the living room while we're there, essentially, but it is kind of surprising some of the stuff that does come across there. So it's like, if you're really not paying attention, your ears kind of perk up and it's like, okay, wait, did I just hear that right? This is a kid's video and they're talking about this or that or whatever the case may be.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks.
Well, I got one for you, Isaiah. Maybe it's a little funny. I never could crack the case on this one. when I worked at Verizon, a lady came in and she said that I don't know if the son was 13 or 14 years old, but they could also track what was going on with his phone. And they said after he went to bed, like after everybody said goodnight, somebody must have been hacking his device, because it seems like people were looking up naked pictures of people and watching naked videos on his phone. And like he must have been hacked because he was in bed. He was already asleep. There's no way that could have been him. So somebody must have been hacking his device. So I don't know if you've done any research on, like, a 13-year-old or 14-year-old boy's phone getting hacked from somebody in the local area to look up naked pictures of people.
Yeah, it's a difficult one because there are like advanced tech options to do that, but 9 times out of 10, the kid figured out how to download a VPN onto their phone at some other point, and what is there is installed, whether it was installed that night or not.
Oh no, they didn't have any safeguards. They just had they could just watch what he was doing. So he wasn't downloading anything except for just, I don't know, just somehow magically, I guess you can look this stuff up. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know either.
I'm just kidding. That kid was looking up porn. That's a joke.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Anybody else got anything before I start jumping in with some solutions?
Just really quick. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Andrea.
The only other thing I was going to add, and this is, I know reality for me, but I think with the way that things are right now, where usually both parents are working in the house. I know from me, when my girls were younger, there were times I was for social media, not necessarily social media. I guess it was probably YouTube was more, especially when the girls were younger, where it would actually buy me a little bit of time. So I think if I had to go back in time, I wouldn't use it sometimes as a crutch, because there were times where I needed that. I'm like, I have to get this done. And if they weren't playing outside, I was like, here, watch this, and I know a lot of my family members do that right now. And it's almost like everybody's on autopilot. They're like, oh, well, here, go ahead and do this, just to buy them a little bit of time. So I think the awareness comes from, parents these days too. I didn't have that awareness. So YouTube babysitter. Yeah, Rick. Yeah, you're right. It's fair.
That's right. Yeah. Randy, were you going to say something?
I was just going to say, trying to find the balance of allowing our kids to be so comfortable with technology that they're not left behind as the world expands and grows into what it's going to become, but also still managing it, and keeping them safe. But then that knowing knowledge that is where the future is going, and we want our kids to be prepared for everything becoming technical based like that. So, some of us kids who had a computer from a very young age and learned how to use the computer, we know how to use it because we were given it at a young age. It's the same thing with the technology. If we give it to them at a younger age, they're going to know how to work it better than we are. So that's kind of the aspect where I worry, if we just take away technology completely until they're like, late teenage years, they're going to be behind the game.
That's right. Thank you. Anyone else?
I got one thing, Isaiah. I'm really interested what you think about the balance between allowing them to have the messenger and the group apps and just cutting them from social media completely. Because coming from a younger generation, I can tell you from experience, if you're not in the group chats, then you're excluded. That's where all of the plans are made. That's where you go out. That's where you communicate with your friends. So if you cut them from social media, you're isolating them.
That's right. Thank you. I'll address that.
I have a major, I don't want to say major fear, but I'm in a big ocean right now. I've got a preteen, and obviously the phone conversation has come up, but I don't know how to protect without being the helicopter. You want to give the freedom and the education, but where's the balance? And things are moving so fast. And I am like the worst millennial ever. I text on my phone. That's about it.
Okay. Thank you.
I got a question to throw on there for you too, Isaiah.
Yep.
This is the one that would be more like the behavioral part of it. As a teenager, they have a really hard time being able to communicate in adult conversations. They just don't have the development for that yet, but they have access to all this adult information. And so even if it was one of the ideas to expose with understanding, like you're going to see it, but we have to talk about it, they also seem like they're not really capable of having the conversations for what they're exposed to. And so even when we have our girls, we're like, if you're going to do adult things, we got to have adult conversations. And it seems like they're not capable of handling the amount of information that's coming in and how we can even try to bridge that gap.
That's right.
And
Thank you.
also the trust on that, because cyberbullying is super big. I would imagine it's not based on your location. It's probably just more different platforms for each geographical area. They have their thing that they like.
That's right.
But how do you protect in that when kids have a tendency to be so trusting?
Good. Yeah. Yes. My daughter from the young age, my first one too, is like, she would walk off with any stranger anytime. Of course, she's going to be susceptible to, these passes online. Thanks.
One another thing I would like to add is talking behind a screen is so much easier than talking to somebody in public. It's and there's this like weird transition to where I actually saw within my son this past week. He's fine talking on the phone or texting and stuff like that, but then when he gets into like real life situations, it just doesn't, like, he doesn't know how to deal with them. He just like ends up walking away and avoiding the situation instead of having to figure it out.
That's a good one, man. Jesse also brought that up with his son was, I think he's 20, I think maybe turning 21. And his entire infrastructure was all built around, like Druss said, group chats and text message groups. And when it got time for him to go on a date, he had zero utilities for in-person conversation, and his only saving grace to even try to rationalize the idea was for him to have a group go on his date because he didn't know how to operate as an individual or be autonomous. He only understood being in a group dynamic for that, so he didn't even know how to be on a date or have a regular conversation without texting with a group.
Yeah. I think that's an awesome point because, do you do interesting stuff at home? And I know, we actually date the kids and take them on dates once a month or however often, and spend time doing individual stuff. But if you didn't ever build that, that's the worst time, right? That's like super awkward. You're like, okay, I'm on a date. I've been waiting for this my whole life. Now what do I do?
They just start texting at dinner.
Let's text each other. That's right.
There's actually also some research about that in a couple books, but about how like we're built for connection. We're built for face-to-face connection, and that kids' development is getting impaired because of this tech generation. And the neurobiology and the chemical hits that we need to have in our body to feel that connection with others, we're not getting it. And you don't get it via text, and you don't get it on the phone. You get a little bit more on the phone, but they measured that stuff. And so we're losing all of that too. And all that comes to play as well.
Socializing is based on a skill, and with the tech and stuff like that, I do agree with you, Jennifer. It diminishes that socialized skill that just a person, and it will create so much from anxiety and depression to social anxiety. You just don't know what to do in that situation because you never were in that situation. You're always behind the screen for most of your life.
Yeah. I worked with kids for years in a therapeutic setting, and the percentage of presenting issues that had to do with technology was huge. And whether it's social anxiety, I mean, a lot of it was social anxiety, but and the dependence on technology, and it's really scary. Yeah, Chris, it's super scary.
Isaiah, do you have any differences where, I mean, is this clear across the board for both boys and girls, or are there going to be differences for the genders?
Okay, yeah, let's use that to segue in. There are differences between girls and boys. There are also just differences between each of your kids. And so as I transition to addressing some of y'all's issues that you brought up, which I share too, the main things I'd like to land first are some answers that don't satisfy. So the first non-satisfactory answer to me is wait till 8th, or some other jingle of this is the age at which they have a phone. I did my job as a parent, right? They reached 18. Washing my hands of the matter. How many other areas of life would you do that? Wait until age 15. Now they get a gun. We're not going to train them how to use a gun before then. They just get one. The arbitrary ages don't really work. And you have a lot of kids at different developmental stages, including same gender, in your same home. So you're going to need something, a way to talk about this that's different than an arbitrary age. And I'm going to give that to you in a second. The second answer that doesn't satisfy is time. The idea of, okay, let's measure screen time. You get 2 hours a day, 3 hours a day, 1.5, whatever the heck it is. The reason that that's not a great answer is because like the first one, it doesn't actually teach your kid anything. Just here's the time. They're going to fight it and try to expand beyond it. But it also, when you have that limit of time, you're going to feel desperate to do certain things in that time rather than other things in that time. And Ty wants his kid to learn to research. But if you feel scarce for your time on technology, you're going to be playing Fortnite, not researching, and squeezing that into every bit of the 2 hours. So all that time is not created equal. And then you end up with a scenario where after they've used their screen time, they tell you, they're like, oh, but for this homework assignment, I have to watch some videos about whales. And you're like, that's what screen time's for. Well, it's gone. And so then you make an exception and you let them watch another 30 minutes of screen time or whatever. And then half the time we're not counting other screens that may be on or off in the house or elsewhere. So I don't think time is a viable answer here either. We're going to have to come up with something more mature, but also something that that our kids can put their arms around and understand. The last one that I don't think works is finger shaking. Like, oh, tech is bad. And back in my day stuff, most of us are millennials. And so we already know, like, we want to throw up when people say that to us because we got that from the boomers. And it's like, we have computers now. But it just doesn't help, right? No kid is persuaded through finger shaking to do this. So we've got to find a way to shift it to where we're building a plan together with our child. So the two things that I want to land for you tonight are, first of all, it's a tool, not a toy. Phones are tools, not toys. Let me break that down for you a little bit. You reach for a tool to do a job. When I did the design work for the Pinwheel phone, one of my favorite things to do was to interview kids who don't have a phone yet and ask them, what do they want it for? Really, what do you want to do with it? A lot of them have no clear idea. They just want to play some games, they think, or do what other friends are doing. And when you ask them about how that helps them, they don't know. But that's because this has become a multi-category device. So one of the favorite unlocks for me has been, and you can use any old model that you want, but to take the different areas of life and notice that the phone crosses all of them because it's got an app for everything. There are apps for health. There are apps for your relationships. There are apps for giving. This wheel is just one random of many wheels. There are apps for, let's insert more topics here, for everything from fitness to spiritual to your sports team to entertainment. There's all these domains of life that come together on the phone. How many domains of life are there on a Nintendo Switch, though? There's one. It's a gaming and entertainment device. That's what it is. How many domains of life are there on an exercise bike? There's one. It's a health device. So what makes it confusing is that this supercomputer crosses lines. And that's why answers like how much time you're going to spend on it fall apart, and why arbitrary ages fall to pieces, is because if your kid's on a sports team, and this is how we coordinate rides to and from the sports event, well, shoot, they probably need to be able to communicate to and from the sports event. If the phone's the only way to do it, get them a phone for that and lock it down to that. So what I like to suggest to parents is to take something like this and build out with your child the domains of life that you care about and really want to look at, and say phones are tools, not toys, because they're special. Phones are special in two main ways. The first way is they're attached to your body. I don't lug an Xbox around with me. They do have smaller ones, so I guess that doesn't fully follow, but like I don't take it to the bathroom with me. This phone is everywhere. That makes it a very unique and special device because you don't have to choose to use it. And Rick's whole thing, everything is a choice, this corrupts that because it's a seamless non-choice. Even if while I'm going to the bathroom, I decide to check the stock market, how many other things are blaring at me? Next thing I know, I'm on TikTok and I've been standing there over the toilet for 20 minutes. I did not intend to do that, but that happened to me because I wasn't strong enough to resist the forces of this. Well, I wouldn't also want to send somebody to the red light district in Taiwan every single night and expect them to never even set eyes on something lustful, right? That's just not going to happen. This thing is programmed to draw us in, and it's on our bodies. So one of the biggest things we can do to put choice back into it is to say, there are some domains of life that we don't let on this thing. Only you can decide what that is. I would suggest no gaming, no social. That doesn't mean no communication. It means no social. So when we game, when we social, we're going to use the right device for the job, the right tool for the job. This isn't the best tool for those things anyways. It's pretty much low grade attention sucking. That's what most things on the phone are. And so why not go get an Xbox and play Fortnite with your kids by turning it on? And that's why I don't have it in the house, the VRs. We got some VR headsets. I really like that because when you put them on, it's like you left this place and you went to that place and you're going to play a game. And then when you're done playing the game, which will happen, you take it off and now you're back in the other place. And so you had to make a choice to go there and a choice to come back. And that choice had a lot more steps to it. And so it has a stronger wall between different choices that you're making. One random pro tip here that I've really found valuable is when your child is entering a entertainment domain of life, if you choose to do that, and you put a time limit on it in that domain of life, we're going to play Xbox for 30 minutes or whatever, help them choose what they're going to do next before they start. That's one of the best ways to help your child give you less attitude and be more ready to make the shift at the end of their time limit, is that they already decided after this, I'm going biking or I'm going to do homework or whatever. That commitment is a really strong one. Random good one. Okay. The second thing about this is it's best said in one of these studies. There's a guy at UT who did a study where they looked at the phone if it's on the table face up if it's on the table face down, if it's in your pocket, your purse, another room, in thousands and thousands of interactions of work and conversation. And here's what they found. The journal article is called something like "The mere presence of a smartphone makes us dumber." Here's how that works. If you and I are sitting across from each other, and I think we all learned this, most of us, because we went through the smartphone transition. At first, it was cool you had one, and they were there, they were everywhere. And we all learned, without anybody telling us, eventually start putting them face down. And I think since then, we've all pretty much learned, most of us don't even do that anymore. They mostly stay in the pocket. That's intuitively smart, because what the researchers found is that just that you see that this phone is there means it's a possibility that it could draw your attention. And so the way that the other person pays attention to you is different. It's not fully committed and all in level of connection. It's a mostly all in, but there is a possible distraction that can happen. It's also the same for your own creativity. When I'm not in very stressful roles that are constant communication or being online, which I hate, I have gotten a lot of power out of leaving my phone in the other room. Because they're like, even in your pocket or a purse, it's a draw to you. But if you straight up are like, it's in the other room, it's off, I didn't even bring it to work, it puts you in the creative zone where you're fully committed to where you are. And so this kind of goes back to the main point, which is that as parents, we have to show what we want. How we pay attention and form connection and are distractible is very likely to be modeled by our kids. So those two things together are meant to give you some tools to work on as a parent and say, I can build a plan with my kid. So let me show you a plan in motion. This is not a great plan. It is a plan with my daughter, Evelyn, where I made her read. I think I pulled 10 horror stories on Discord. And I was like, I want you to read these 10 horror stories on Discord and come up with a plan. I want you, first of all, to identify the bad situations and then come up with a plan for each of those situations. So we start having language around the skill, and then I can add or remove from this and create the final plan. So this is something in development that we have on her path to, she really wants a real phone because she does not have a real phone. And I've said, you know, there's some skill building you're going to have to do to get there. I'm technically behind on reviewing this because this has been sitting here for some time. But this is the direction that a lot of people are finding value in, is you build a plan together or you build a contract together, including the consequences of what happens on the other side of that contract. So I'd like to show you one of my favorite resources right now, which is by the same people who made Bark. They created a Facebook group, ironically, called Parenting in a Tech World. And you can see there are bajillions of people here. I think it's like 200K. Yeah, 260,000 people here. They have, I think, 8 full-time moderators. They do a really good job in here of monitoring technology issues, and you end up with all these situations of like, okay, here's my tech setup, because every family has a different tech setup. Your iPhone, your Android, you already have these devices, you don't have those devices. Well, you need it for this and that thing, and so on. So, and then you have people like making discoveries about Roblox or Discord are the biggest ones. And anytime you want to figure that stuff out, is just, you can come in here and search it, right? So I love this of like, I'm going to search this group for Discord, and I'm going to get multiple lots of story things on Discord. And some of these people are going to give full on exposés of what happened with their kid on Discord, whether it's good, whether it's bad, the limits and rules that they have, all that kind of stuff. So I really like this forum for that. The other reason that, oh man, there's some sad stories in here too. The other reason that I really like this group is, what was it? It's the confidence as a parent that, nope, I'm not the only parent who's not giving their kid a smartphone. You really get a lot of that in here because people are having that conversation all the time. And then you can bring your kid and help read this, and you can look at it together and be like, nope, here's 100,000 other people all saying why they don't have a smartphone yet and why the issues are different. So I have found this at least helpful to know I'm not the craziest crunchy yoga person in the planet for some of my decisions, that they're actually relatively mainstream. So yeah, that's a good resource. Okay, so I'm going to stop there. There's some other stuff that I could share. Let me summarize one thing though I forgot to do, which is the competency scale. Okay, so here's the real plan. Build your domains of life that you're okay with, and identify some of the apps in each of those domains that your kid needs. Like Dress mentioned, if they're doing sports stuff or if they have friends, they probably need a way to communicate with them. There are safer and less safe ways to communicate. On trending towards less safe, probably more like a Discord, a Snapchat, something like that. Trending towards more safe is like a GroupMe or Facebook Messenger, or a text service with monitoring. So you can see that with Bark, or you can fully spy on them or whatever. You can kind of go through your wheel and look at that. But then the more fun thing is to change the conversation to competency. And several of you already made this point tonight. We don't have to overdo it. This is one of my like really deeply developed competency scales. I think you can just take it down to a 1 to 5. But the reason I brought this up is that there's a negative line on any competency scale where you're doing harm and you're doing it unintentionally, you're doing it wildly and unintentionally, or you're literally doing harm intentionally. That goes kind of like below the line. When your child's there, you have to take it away and build to a spot where they're usually in a beginner phase, where they're just starting to notice what the issues are. What you can do is help agree with them on what some of the gates are towards competency. For example, I would love it if my daughter started working on music producing and needed to use her computer a lot for that, because that fits her natural strengths and abilities. But for her to do that, that means she's going to have to be in internet forums like Reddit and Facebook groups where the people who are working on music tech are talking about their tools, and she can see questions answered and watch tutorials and stuff. So we have to actually assess her competency to use those tools and then review that every once in a while. And I don't know exactly what rhythm to tell you that is or break it down. I could give you a spreadsheet if any of you all would like a spreadsheet. That's not hard. I think this is better on your refrigerator if you're the kind of person who puts something on a refrigerator. Like, here are the 3 or 4 things we're working on right now and where you're at with it. Let's assess this. Here's how to grow your skill. For Evelyn, I want to see her grow skill by watching content, showing and noticing areas where they are pulling her attention away, being able to name that, and then identifying ways to not get pulled in. That right there is kind of sufficient in some technology settings for me. Others, if she wants to be on Instagram, that's going to be a harder conversation. I don't think it's an impossible one, though. Some of us have very mature kids. I'm thinking of this other 14-year-old right now who, like, if she was on Instagram and Facebook, she'd probably be coordinating like babysitting jobs, starting a business, or helping the neighbors with their cats, not getting sucked into the bad side of that, because her competency and resistance and interests are already a very different direction in bent. So I think this is very individualized. And so it is work to do as a parent. There's no one size fits all. But you can also have confidence in that because you give your child a pathway to graduation, a pathway to, this is what it takes from my point of view to be competent to use that app in this domain of your life. Let's build a roadmap for it and give them control and power to do it. That's the main recommendation. I put myself a note here. I remind one other thing on the random stuff that I've learned is the digital detox. These devices, there's a lot of interesting research on it, do trigger very similar parts of the brain as narcotics, but the breaking free cycle is actually much easier. Usually it's about 3 days. 3 days of nope. And all of a sudden, boredom starts breeding brilliance. What I really like about learning and noticing that is it's not my job as a parent to come up with what they're going to do. If they want suggestions, I can have chores. I might have some fun suggestions like games or things outside or whatever. It'd be nice if they were realistic, but it's not on me to come up with creativity, because you know how fun and stupid, dumb kids are? They can turn a box and a piece of rubber into something fun if they allow themselves to play. And we want them to learn to play. And when a parent comes there and makes how they're going to play, even that may not be play. And I really am excited about that as a topic. And, you know, when you engage with them, play, just stupid, because one of the things I've learned in the brain science research is the opposite of depression is not happiness. The opposite of depression is play. So it's a chance for them to do that. Okay, I think enough open musings. Happy to give more resources and answer questions and thoughts that you all have.
I totally dig what you're doing right now, man. This is very helpful for us. Also, like Andrea, you could probably back me up on this one. Just our way of maybe even measuring their competency and what they're doing, because we do an exposure with explanation, but it's really just that language gap. And so to be able to have a measurement tool for competency would be a way better way for us to do it versus like Phil said, the trust but verify, the old Ronald Reagan. It's been kind of fallen flat because the verification's been kind of incomprehensible. Like it's like, so how do you think you're doing? I don't know.
Now, is the keylogger thing too far or no?
If your child knows about it, would be my answer. So when we go to privacy stuff, I just think spying without communication is the weasel's way out. And that's not what I want to train my kid to be. But some kids might need extreme measures of control because of where their assessed competency is. So you might have been just joking, Phil, but I'd be down in the right context with the right kid. But I'm going to tell them, I'm not going to do this like, haha, I was spying on you and I found this thing.
I got another one too. I like the boredom breeds brilliance thing and that 3-day thing. Is this a periodic thing you guys try to do, or is it like we should have like maybe like an agreement? Like, all right, on some of these weekends we're losing phones, but it is also a difficult thing because we don't exactly lead by the best example.
Yeah, exactly. What's the example? And it's like, we shouldn't ask kids to meet standards we can't meet. They'll call BS on that. But the digital detox is good for, first of all, if you're making a transition from one plan to a new plan because you realize that what we're doing now doesn't work, a digital detox is often a really good way to reset and get back on that plan. And that's one thing, like, go search that parenting in a tech world forum and you'll see people being like, I got my happy-go-lucky 14-year-old back and she was so dark and moody, and just like 3 or 4 days later, all of a sudden she's this likable person to be around again. Wow. I also think, yeah, your vacations or whatever, here's the craziest experiment that Jen and I did when very early on in the Pinwheel journey, after like encountering a lot of this research. I was like, all right, let's try it. We're going to go on a 36-hour one-way road trip. You know, however much that is, 2 ways, no iPads. Let's try it. And it was like absolutely terrifying because the girls had iPads and they had iPad time at both houses. We have since done away with, they don't have iPads at my house. They still have iPad time at their mom's house. I can't control that. But here they don't. It's not an option. We don't talk about it. We do sometimes play video games together. We'll get a VR or we'll get multiple computers going But that's probably the exception, not the rule. And we ended up having a great time. It doesn't mean like computers are bad though, right? We still did bring an iPad, which we put up front, and I probably shouldn't do this, but we all watched a movie while driving, right? We listened to most of Harry Potter, and we've been working through that for the last 2 or 3 years. Is like all the Harry Potter books. That's what we do when we go on road trips and visit stuff and draw and bring books and stuff. And not saying that that's better or somebody is bad because they use technology to distract. I get it. Like sometimes, especially that like 2 to 5 year old age where you're surviving, you might need technology to distract. No judgment from me for that. As a way of life, it's not greatest for your kid, but it's greater than killing them. So, you know, on a scale of ends, it's all right. But yeah, I think you can actually like literally detox and see your kid be a different kid after a few days and keep it that way if you want to.
I've got a question I'd like to throw in here real quick if I can.
Yeah.
The one thing that I've kind of had trouble with bridging the gap of per se is how much of a leash to give them without making them feel like we don't trust them. So like with my daughter, you know, like she is, you know, fairly intelligent, and I feel like she would make the proper choices, but I also know that all of these things are designed against them essentially as well. So it's not that I don't trust her, more like I don't trust the app or whatever other thing that it may be. But that's a conversation that tends to kind of fall flat when you come across that way, as far as, you know, it's not you that I don't trust, it's everybody else that's out there. Is there an easier way to bridge that gap by like, you know, like some kind of a joint account on whatever the app may be, or something along those lines that can make that transition a little bit easier?
Great question. I think you're right in the money by reframing it as a trust issue. This is not a trust issue, and this is not what trust means. And you can give analogies too. Your spouse trusts you, but they don't trust you sitting with, you know, at I don't know, Pornhub studios inside of a casino. That's what this is. This is a casino in your pocket. It's programmed like one. The exact same bells, whistles, brain science, whatever, to even help you forget time and make choices you don't want to make. I don't trust this. I think you're exactly right there. As for each app, I mean, it depends on what they're getting into. I think with the tool, not toy philosophy and a results driven philosophy, you literally are like, it's let's look at the results together. This is what we're going to look at. And it's going to be about what you want as much as what I want, because we're not looking in this case at the input. We are looking at the result together because you agree to it and I agree to it. So now let's figure out how to deliver on that. And let's do a technology review every 6 months or whatever. Don't go crazy, but here's the 8-12 topics we're going to review in 6 months. And do it yourself. I think that's you know, the other part is you can lead by example here and admit, every single one of us on this call can admit that we have had varied relationships with our phones, and we have to dial it back too in specific ways. And I think doing that together is probably a really healthy thing.
Yeah, it's a tough line though, trying to figure out that balance. Because I know we've done that with our girls too, and like trying to like Andrea and I both have like the ones that will talk, like Haley will talk to her and Caitlin will talk to me, and trying to figure out like we do like random trust checks, like all right, let's see your phone. What are you getting into? Show us some messages. But then the other part too, and this is where it's difficult for our girls from middle school and high school, is there's a lot of pressure to fit in by doing things that others are doing. And so even with like text messages and stuff like this, like even like Haley's little boyfriend who's like really trying to push some adult limits here, you know, or Caitlin trying to fit in with like the in crowd and what are they telling you their peer pressure is to do. Those have also like, it's just amplified the old versions of what it was when we were growing up. It seems like on a much larger scale or a much more intense or 24-hour bereavement versus just at school.
That's right. Exactly. When when school decides to cancel you, they can cancel you at 1 a.m. and you can wake up with pictures of you and stuff everywhere and locked out of everything, right? It can go real dark real fast. I think the biggest thing I'd say, I'd toss this right back to you, Rick, which is what level of resistance to the others are doing it demon, phones aside, do we want to see in our kids? And how can we help them do that?
Yeah, this has been where the competency for that conversation has been an issue. This is where the development of a teenage brain to have an adult conversation becomes complicated because they don't have the utilities for that conversation. And so they kind of just sit there kind of blanked trying to survive the conversation versus grow through it or understand it because it's going right over their head. And that's probably where it's been, a hard thing for us going, I want to know you're doing a good job, but you're not showing that or communicating that. So I don't know how to measure this when you're kind of blank staring me. And I think they're still trying their best, but don't have the tools to have the conversation versus what they're exposed to. And there are girls and kids, like there's girls in their grade that like 7th grade that were already having sex and having a lot of sexual interactions and things like this. And they're exposed to a lot very young to where by the time they would be at a competent age for that, they've been exposed by these people constantly. And so there's just no way to really keep them from exposure. And
I really picked that up in that movie, the documentary Childhood 2.0, is they did a great job interviewing teens and showing there's basically 2 categories at every school. There's the kids who are doing all that stuff and the kids who aren't. And there's not really much of an in-between. And that to me is like the main thing with this others are doing it part is, okay, but where's the line when you accept that as an argument? If the reason you're going to do something is other people are doing it, and I know it sucks. I was a teen. I made the argument. At a certain point, I'm going to intervene here as a parent, and you can, when you're a certain age, resent me and hate me forever and go have sex with everybody you want to and drink as much as you want to. Some people do that. And other people are like, thanks, mom and dad. I'm glad you kept me from that. I don't know which it's going to be. That's your choice. But others do it is completely unmoving to me. What is moving to me, though, is what Druss said. If I want to have friends, I have to be able to communicate with them. One of the things we can do that's really hard is push for the right communication tool. You can ask your soccer coach to not use this app, instead use that app. Why? Because here's these 5 examples from horror Facebook stories. Oh, that's pretty easy. There's a lot of parents out there making the case to stop using the most unsafe tech like Discord and start using safer tech like Facebook Messenger. Hilarious that Facebook Messenger is considered safe tech, but it is. Or just text groups or things like that, right? So your others do it kid, when you can get it to a tool, like what do you need? Well, I need to be able to communicate. Why? So you can be at the right time and right place. Awesome. So you can have a conversation when you want to. Great, as long as it's between these times. Let's work together to set that up in some way, shape, or form. I found out for my daughter that was a very significant thing was Discord and Minecraft, because all the kids who play Minecraft are on Discord. Like, okay, we're only going to do it on the computer. This can't be on your phone. That's because of how we manage a computer in this house and the way that I've got it set up, which I could probably do better at, but it's not horrible for the setup that we have that can work. But that's where we're just getting so unique. I don't think there's a way as a parent to find a template. And there's also not as a way as a parent to get it perfect. And there's definitely not a way as a parent to be seen by your kid as awesome until way later.
Yeah.
Right?
Would
It's
you
like the
say
same
then-
thing in relational dynamics, Rick, right? Which is we're like, stop looking to the woman for your approval of success as a man and vice versa, right? You have to find it yourself. We have to teach our kids that on this topic, or we have to at least live it ourselves on this topic.
I agree. So just so I can make sure you're clear, you're more on exposure with training versus restriction, and then hope you figure it out.
That's right. Yep. And you can make dumb extreme analogies like the day that I toss my daughter the keys to the car, she's already driven a bunch. She's ready to starting, right? Instead of just like, okay, you turned 16, here they are. And the longer that training cycle is, well, how do you do that? Well, as a parent, that means you're vulnerable. You tell them why you're doing this or that as they're young, and you start conditioning them to understand and be ready for these things.
And I think that's like when you go into, what are kids going to hear and see from other kids? Well, we don't necessarily have control of that, especially when they're in school. They're going to hear things, they're going to see things. The biggest thing that we can do, I think, is have the conversation about that and make sure that they know right from wrong, and what's going to happen if they do those, the consequences of those things that they're hearing and seeing. And that's where our kids that know those things will thrive where others might not.
That's right. Yeah, I think this is a good example case study too, is like, okay, I did get my kid a smartphone and I spent the time to lock it down in parental controls. There's a lot of flexibility they do have, and there's some flexibility they don't. Guess what? You're still not your child's best friend, because they're going to push right on that. You got me an Android, not an iPhone? Anybody without an iPhone is nothing. Or you got an iPhone, but it's locked down. You got me an iPhone, but I can't use XYZ? Anybody who can't use Snapchat and TikTok is a loser. So there's no like spot where you can suddenly land and be like, no, as long as I land here and keep this bad out and this good in, my teen is not going to give me grief. They're going to give you grief.
Here's one thing that was interesting with that exact conversation, because we had that without Snapchat. I won't have friends. Without this Instagram, I will never be able to have any interactions. How does everybody talk to me? Everyone's on Snapchat. But what was scary to me is though that the behavior around the argument mimicked that of someone with addiction properties, like someone who like is an alcoholic or addicted to drugs, and you're taking them away. And it was like, well, can I just log in for just one hit? Can I just have one hit? I'll be fine. That's all I want. Just one. Let me just log in and check one snap. That's all I need. That's all I want. Just one. And it was like tears rolling down her face. And I'm like, this is what addicts sound like when you take their drugs away. And it really was a very interesting interaction. And it showed like how much even those dopamine hits, or how much that hold on just around this app is that strong, and how underdeveloped they are to defend against it.
Yeah. So what about this in real life topic of, and it has to do with what Amy and Ty especially were talking about. Do you do interesting enough stuff to make your life not a place they want to escape via technology? And that's what Rick talks about with the violent video games, is like, yay, I'm powerful here at least. But what if for your kid, it's like, yay, something interesting is happening here at least. And I don't say that to guilt trip anyone, but I think if we're really intentional and studious about it and recognize that whole denial thing of like, you can't just send your kid out and say, come back when it's dark anymore. That is neither fun nor safe, maybe. I don't know. So what is there to do that's that interesting? And in today's culture, am I making them do math class and Duolingo and this sport and that sport all the time so there's no free play? Well, then they might not know how to free play. And of course they want to escape, because at least their internal reality on technology is a reprieve from their external reality of being pushed. And I don't know what anybody's lives are like, but I know that that's the draw that I have as a parent constantly, is you're drawn to compare your kid and push them harder in today's world. And we're going to have resistance to that if we want our kid to have the attention, connection, and presence with their world. We got to be part of that.
Yeah, one thing oh, go ahead.
One of the things I kind of did with my son this past week was I said, okay, after this game, go outside and play with your friend. because they're waiting outside for you, wanting to play. And I actually came across the whole entire. He's like, Dad, when do I come home? I'm like, when the lights turn on. And he actually didn't come home. He was out in the yard where I keep an eye on them, of course, but he actually didn't come home until the street lights turned on. And he actually had a blast with his friends. And he's like, he came back. He's like, this is the best day ever. He actually didn't want it to stop. So that was a good win on that.
That's awesome. Yeah, he lost track of time, right? And that's when
Yeah.
you're really having fun.
So fortunately in our house, we're huge readers. Just kind of the culture that I set up from a very young age made reading fun with Dr. Seuss. And it's thankfully stuck. I have a 12-year-old and then I have 2 younger ones. So we do a lot of reading. We turn a lot of the electronics off, but I'm not naive enough to know that there won't be a day where that level probably goes down. And those are the parts I'm thinking a little bit more in the future to how do I keep the open communication going between my kids, my boys and I, as they approach that age, without it being like the helicopter, the intrusive, where they feel like they don't have the privacy and then potentially maybe want to run away from that just to get that freedom.
Rick, what's your answer first?
I kind of wanted to make sure. Hold on. I kind of want to make sure I kind of understand the question the right way. Like, which part are you worried about them, like them quitting reading at a certain point, or I guess what is the main fear?
Yeah, just like how Isaiah was saying, like, are we creating the interesting side away from the virtual world to be interesting? So, I mean, I'm pretty creative. However, they're boys. They're going to want to do what their friends do, like 16, 17, 18. And that might be more virtual time.
I think for that, it
electronics.
depends on the restrictions that we put on the real world, I guess. Because like if we're giving so many options to be able to go into books and fantasy world and going into other things, like what's the restrictions on the real world? And one thing I see, like even with moms, with young boys, is they try to restrict rough and tumble play. They try to restrict like wrestling and doing hard stuff, but the wrestling and rough and tumble play is super healthy for a young man's development. And so when they're like, no, stop wrestling, stop playing, stop doing that, but it shows them restraint, it shows them how far they can push, it shows them how far till they get hurt. And so it actually teaches them a lot of healthy things also. This is why almost all animals do rough and tumble play also. And so this is where, like, if you're limiting the type of fun they're allowed to have, and you limit the
Just
stuff
want to
that they're
listen for a
allowed
minute.
to
I gotta
do.
let my mind do something.
Hold on, you're not muted, Victoria. There you go. But if if you're restricting the fun things they like to do, it'll probably make them be like, well, whatever am I going to do then? So I would probably lean towards let boys be boys. Like,
One of the things that when I was like that age, I hated reading. I hated reading with a passion. And then I found a couple books that piqued my interest. Like I'm the more outdoorsy survival type guy. And I found a book that was My Side of the Mountain, and I read that first sequel, and then I got into another sequel of The Other Side of the Mountain, which was really cool because pretty much this kid goes out into the wilderness because he was just got tired of his home life and just wanted to live off the land out on the mountain. So I mean, that's another like suggestion I would say, just for me being that age and hated reading.
Go ahead, Emmy.
I was just going to say thank you so much. That's good to know because we're mountain people.
Yeah.
We don't live in the mountain. I mean, we live in the mountains, but we're not like creepy mountain people.
We're mountain people. Well, okay, not creepy. I like that.
One of the things that we do at my house is I have very outdoorsy boys too. I got a 15-year-old, a 10-year-old, my daughter's 8, and she's the most boy out of the 3 of them. So a lot of the times, like we've always gotten them books for birthdays, holidays, and stuff like that, encouraging them to read, and they all love to read. But at the same time, like I got my boys like survival books and like plant identification books. So my middle boy will be like, Dad, let's go. Oh, I found this mushroom in this book. I want to go find it. I'm like, well, mushrooms are hard to find, but let's go see if we can take a look. And then you're wandering around the woods for 2 hours and there's, not an ounce of electronics in sight, and they lose track of that time because they're like, oh, look, there's a bird that's in this book, and like stuff like that. Now my 15-year-old is to the point where if it's not an iPhone, an iPad, or an Xbox, he doesn't want anything to do with it. So what we did was we had to put family time. Like you have so much family time that you got to spend a day, and if you do that, then you could have your electronics, and that's we usually do it when it gets dark out. Here in Pennsylvania, it's dark at 5 o'clock right now, this time of year. So in the summertime, they can't have it till after 9 o'clock. So if you do it, we do it by dark. So you're allowed to have your electronics when it gets dark and when you're getting ready to relax or whatever. So, but like having books like for I know for boys and even my daughter, educational, like go out and learn something like, oh, that's a poisonous plant. Like I shouldn't touch that. And then in the back of your mind, you're like, damn, my kid knows better than most adults not to touch that, that poison ivy or that poison oak, stuff like that.
The one piece of opinion I'd throw in here, Amy, is that in the earlier third of childhood, I think they follow your culture. In the next third, it's a weird transition, and there's no two ways to say that. It's just a hard transition. And then kind of in the final third, they have their own friends and interests. And the thing that we can do best is help them know how to be a good friend and know how to pursue their own interest. And they'll do that by how they pursued our interests with us and were friends with us. It's unlikely they're going to trust you or be your buddy through that time. But if you prepare them for that time, then they're very likely to make good choices. I think it's that awkward in between that just there aren't many good rules for, as they're starting to figure out, well, the family is like this, but I'm more of a music guy. And what does that mean? And that's just a tricky business.
And
No,
one
that's
thing that
really
I just
good.
had kind of pop in my head while Nick was talking there a second ago, as far as like any kind of screen time or screen limits or anything like that, I've seen where some people would kind of put the amount of time that they can be on a certain screen and relate that towards like tasks that they do around the house. So, if you, put your laundry in the hamper, you get an extra half hour, for example, or whatever the case may be. Would that still be kind of along the same side effects as far as you were talking earlier with only allowing a certain amount of screen time per day, or would that change since they were earning that time?
Yeah, here's the only shift I would make to that is instead of calling it screen time, call it what it is: entertainment time, social media time, mind-droppingly dumb YouTube time. Like, that's okay. You can earn yourself some stupid YouTube for 5 minutes by doing this task. Where I worry is if we get them to equate screen time, because then they're just like, let me get this thing. But this thing actually is a pretty sweet device. It has ChatGPT on here. It can like calculate my diet and run all 6 of my bank accounts between each other and help me do my taxes and communicate securely with these other people and track how much our home is worth and what are rental prices in the area and help me play fantasy football and order on Amazon. Wow, this is awesome. And when we equate screen time to like something that you earn, that there's guilt associated with as good and bad as just the screen, that's the part that I think we want to help people get more nuanced on as kids and be like, yeah, you can earn this app time, but you need something else on here. You want to listen to, I don't know, Bible Project or research motorcycles for me? Cool. Go to town. Unlimited amount of researching motorcycles because I haven't had the time to do it and I'm interested.
So how do you, like, if they fail, like, let's just say you find out they had, gone against the rules.
Yeah.
Now, I mean, is that just like, what punishment do you put in place? Like, what boundary? I mean, like, I know having the healthy boundary of if you do this, then this, but where does that come into play? Like, how do you, what would you recommend for the regulation of that?
I think that the recommendation I have is to actually build a partnership with your kid around it. So you say, I noticed this happen, right? And I think it's so different from how you and I grew up of like, do bad thing, whack, right? Really bad punishment.
Right.
Instead, we're trying to, the purpose of the punishment is to build a skill. And so instead we want to say, hey, you crossed the line and did this other thing. What are we going to have to do to keep you from crossing that line again? If you can't come up with anything, I've got some pretty great ideas, but help the kid create the solution. Happens again, hey, your solution wasn't good enough. Now we're going to use one of mine. But
Yeah.
usually, like you can partner with your kid and build this up relationally.
I'll just give a quick example with Evelyn. A few weeks ago, I found her in her room on Discord with her 5-year-old, like 5 years younger than her sister. And I waited until like her sister was going and brushing her teeth. And then I just told Evelyn, I was like, this hurts our trust around you. First off, this computer's not supposed to be in your room. And you're doing something that's not really appropriate for your 9-year-old sister to be doing. And I just explained to her, like, I need you to see how I'm seeing this. And this is what it means to build trust with Dad and I. And this hurts it, right? These kinds of things. And I just had that like really adult conversation with her of like, this was a problem. Please come outside and use the computer where you're supposed to. And then like she came up to me later, like a half hour later, and she was like, I think a time limit would help me on Discord. Like on her own, I didn't even prompt her. She was like, I think that would help me to not get distracted and spend too much time on that, you know, talking about stuff with her friends. So, but that's because that pattern is there of like, hey, we're trying to build trust with you. You need to know that this hurt that. And, you know, the principles are there. So.
Thank you. Yeah, I think Jen has a lot to offer on building influence with your kid instead of rules-based parenting, which is a bigger conversation than the phone, right?
Yeah. One of the things that I try to get, because he's, you know, going to watch the YouTube videos, but one of the things I try to get him to do is I try to get him to watch something educational, like a part of history or something that is like not like one of those adult history ones, but more like a kids based history one, to where the child could actually understand it and not get bored.
Yeah.
And then I come up with like 3 to 5 questions about what he learned and what he took away from it. Now, is there a better idea or a better way I could go about doing this this way, or is
I mean, that sounds pretty good. Awesome. Is there a problem that you're seeing from that? Like, that sounds really fun and engaged to me.
Okay, I wasn't sure if I was just pushing him too hard on it, or just because I had some resistance.
The one thing that I would say is anything phony as a parent, your kid knows, and we all know this. And it's basically manipulation if we're being like, yeah, you get to watch TV, but it's healthy TV. Let's not pretend that healthy TV and TV are the same thing. As parents, we just, no, you can do healthy TV. That's what you can do. We don't do the other stuff, but I'm not going to pretend that this should be as fun as something mindless that you would choose on your own. I will tell you that this is how far I'm willing to go. And if you don't like it, there's 2 doors. Use one.
So, yeah, input Ty on that for me is if you make it like school, they're gonna treat it like school. So if you give them like, oh, you watch watch this YouTube video, and then I'm gonna give you a short 3-question quiz on what you learned about in the video. What you do is you let your kid watch a video, you sacrifice your own time, and you watch the same video, and then you talk to them about it. And then they're like, he's like, yeah, well, they were talking about like pirates, and like just make them believe that you knew that you didn't go watch the video too. Just be like, oh yeah, I heard about a pirate in a book. I'm using pirates because my 10-year-old's obsessed.
It would actually be. I would actually suggest something that I already know, like Blackbeard around here.
Yeah,
Blackbeard was like the, gruesome pirate and stuff like that. So it would be like, you know, I would tell him like, there's a big world out there, and there is a lot of historical finds, history and stuff like that that I think would pique your interest. And you know, it's just trying to get him to realize that this world is a lot bigger than you think, bud.
So my 10-year-old loves this video game. It's about sailing around in the ocean, being a pirate. So then I was like, oh, have you ever seen any of the Pirates of the Caribbean movies? He's like, no. I was like, cool. So we sat down and watched one of those together. And he's like, I think pirates are rad. And I'm like, dude, check this. I said, you know how we go to the beach every summer down to the Outer Banks? I said, you want to know how many pirates were down there? And then we go on vacation, and he's like, Dad, can we go to that pirate museum? Absolutely. It's like, you gotta lead with them. You know what I mean? You gotta, like, my buddy's having his first kid, and he's 37. And I said to him, I was like, dude, understand that from that day that child's born, I'm not saying give up all your hobbies, but they're going to take a significant back burner to everything your kids want to do. I said, if you want to be active and involved in that kid's life, you're going to learn to like the stuff your kid likes. Like, yes, if, you know, my kids like to hunt, my kids like to fish, my kids like to do all the things that I like to do, but that's because I involved them in it. I was like, hey, I'm not going fishing by myself anymore. I'm going to go untangle Barbie poles and G.I. Joe poles for 5 hours. And when they catch one sunny, I'm going to have a smile from ear to ear. And that's better than me catching a 10-pound bass. If you make it fun and genuinely fun. And the thing that I've realized with my children the most is when they come to you after school and they're like, Dad, can we play for a little bit? That's not Dad, can we play? That's Dad, I had a shitty day at school and I just want to take my mind off of everything that happened during school. So let's go play tag, or let's go wrestle, or let's go draw, or let's go, play Barbies, or you have to
Hey, man, that was an awesome speech. I'm glad it's recorded. Because you and Ty are nailing it, which is do it with your kids, right? Do stuff, and you're stacking up between movies and video games and life and whatever, but it's because you're interested in doing it together, right? And I'd rather that just be about anime and you guys then have a 6-hour anime marathon together than zone out for 2 hours somewhere else, right? It's like the screen is just not the issue. And it reminds me of a thing that I learned about the gaming. There's two kinds of gaming. There's a kind of gaming where you're like so locked in that you're disassociated and drool is coming out the side of your mouth. And you watch this on some of the streamers and stuff where they're like, they might have a fantastic kill shot or a frustrating death. They're emotionless in that. It means nothing to them. They're just going next to next to next. And then there's another kind of gaming where you invite your friends over and you play like co-op Halo or Smash Brothers or even something really serious like Call of Duty, and you got your bros on there and you're cooperating, but you're connected, you're joshing each other, you're having fun, you're making mistakes and enjoying it. Those are two fundamentally different experiences of the same thing. And so how we're connecting and being with while doing, like, that's where the magic is.
Those are also dangerous because MMOs fall in those categories too, because you're just doing a lot of interaction with people for long periods of time. And like, I've seen people get married playing those games, like not just in game. Like, I met my wife playing this game and that's how we started dating. Like, so there's a lot of interactions with those. The issue is there's also very difficult to find moderation and balance when you're having that type of like connection and gaming at the same time. It's almost like an overload versus like real world. And like, it can be pretty tough.
I lost months of my life to World of Warcraft.
Yeah, Final Fantasy 11.
Months, bro. Months.
I'm still trying to learn how to play Fortnite.
No, good luck. MMOs are different. Those are the World of Warcrafts or Final Fantasies, or the ones where like your large worlds like interacting with people, but you're there for like some of these activities, like you're there for like 24 hours with people, and like you're interacting with real people all the time. And some of them can be like, that's here's where it would fall into a combination of bargaining and denial, is because you're actually living a completely different life. Like you're living in a different fantasy world. Like you're the elf, you know, paladin in this world that's fighting dragons with all of your mage friends. Like, but they're real people who are also living a fantasy life. Now, the issue is some people in real life are not that interesting, but their fantasy character rocks. And this is where they get to live as being a different person or a different thing. That's also, Isaiah, probably a conversation for a different day. Like, if that really is like a proper coping mechanism, or if it falls under the whole like I heard the term copium, like
Yeah.
it's an opium addiction, but it's like copium. I'm coping with how
Yeah.
lame my life is by living this fantasy life.
Yeah, it's a low grade addiction, right?
Yeah.
And it's we all know this because we had at least two lives going on at all times. We do have an internal dialogue. How loud was that when we were teenagers? Did we also enter the world of music? Do we also have it at school? With each friend group, are there multiple ones, right? Some of us could be living 7 or 8 lives in masks and identities. Some of us probably just 2 or 3.
Many of us have had to adapt to. Yeah, that's a good point.
I had a question, Isaiah.
Yeah.
Does the gaming world, is there any research that you've seen that the gaming world goes into addictions? Is it the kind of same behavior?
Yeah, it's the same. It's actually, you know, the word gamification comes from the gaming world. They've just applied it to every app that you know, where you get levels and badges. And one of the keys is variable rewards. Every once in a while, you're surprised. Maybe this thing will happen this time. It's the same thing as a casino slot machine. Oh, maybe, ooh, let me just try one more. Oh, unlucky. Maybe the next one will do it. Oh, maybe the next one. So that's applied in the gaming. It's also very heavy on social. The primary example is doom scrolling. That's the same thing that a gamer feels. And I think women maybe who don't like get into the violent video games, they probably are more prone to the same feeling, which is addiction based, but it's like it's variable rewards addiction based of, well, that sucked. I'm smiling at that. Okay, that's stupid. Whoa, oh, that's funny. Share. Okay, next, like that. And every once in a while, like every 1 in 7 is kind of okay. That's the same exact thing as gaming.
I'll just add in, there's a really good book on this called Super Better. And they actually developed an app because the research that they found was that while on one side it's addictive, it also can teach some pretty important life skills if that skill building is focused. And so they built this app called Super Better. You can download it, it's free. And it's like life skills, but built in a gaming atmosphere. And it's really cool. But the app, so the app's cool, but also the book is really interesting with the research about that. Super Better. Yeah, Super Better is what it's called. Super Better. It's like be a superhero, do the gaming, but let's build it towards something positive.
Yeah, I was going to say pretty much the same thing. I lost a lot of my life to video games, but I also built some of my best skills from video games as well. Like my critical thinking, problem solving. It is partly because I always wanted to be the best, but you tackle the problem, you go, why did I lose this time? How do I get better the next time? What skills do I need to pick up? And that translates into real life as well.
And what I'd like to say is that's not technology driven, right? It's how you do it, which is why it's tool, not toy like, because the same thing happens to athletes. Athletes are supposed to be the opposite of gamers, right? But there are angry athletes who nose to the grind and their parents made them form this alternate identity, or they worked their body to death or whatever. And there are athletes who are genuinely enjoying it and learned life's lessons and become executives and great leaders from their athletic stories. There are coaches who scream and throw chairs at you, and there are coaches who bring out the best in you, right? Same with all of these. It's about how we engage with it rather than what it is by itself.
Do you have any books on that? Because I've been trying to work out the chicken or the egg, which came first? Is it my personality that led to me doing that? Or was it the games that I was playing that bred those skills in me?
I wanted to throw something in here. It like gaming isn't like the thing that I get from gaming is hand and eye coordination, you know, and then your critical thinking side as well. And so like when it comes to gaming, I look at it as more of like to better some skills that are minute, I would call it, to use your hand, like, because you're sitting there playing a game and you know what buttons to push, but you're not even looking at it. You know, that's some crazy, you know, stuff that if you really think about it, you're pushing buttons and you know what you push without even looking at your controller.
Yeah, and if I was actually good at piano, I wouldn't have to look at my hands, right? Because you get there with those things. And when I walk, I don't think now my kneecap is going to bend and do this. So it's integrated into some different part of the brain. And that's skill by definition. That's what skill is when you don't have to think about it anymore and can execute it flawlessly. That's really cool.
I think I mean, I know we're worried about certain things with, you know, kids playing these violent video games and all that stuff, but we still as parents have to take the time to teach our kids the rights and wrongs, all those, the moral things that, they're not going to get from blowing a dude's head off with an RPG. Like, we have to teach them that is not okay. You can't run around with an RPG down Main Street and blow people's heads off. Not okay. Those are the things that we have to like get through to them, and monitoring them at a younger age to not play those crazy games because they can't mentally understand the true right from wrong on that. That's our job too. Right. Once they get a little bit older and you can sit there and be like, yep, you're smart enough. You can go around and, play Grand Theft Auto. Okay, cool. Got it. But that's like that's you judging your kid at that point. Yes, you can, because you're mentally capable of knowing game world, real world. Not killing people with RPGs, giving people hugs is okay. You know what I mean? Stuff like that.
Isaiah, I'd love to get a little bit of perspective on something that I'm dealing with. I like my 12-year-old right now. He's always been drawn to being an engineer. He has a very engineer mind, super like analytical, logistics. He loves it. He gets numbers. So he uses more of the gaming as a building thing. But I mean, it's a slippery slope, right? So what would you do? Because he can't decide if he wants to be an engineer with elevators and buildings, or if he wants to be a computer, like gaming engineer. What would you say? How do I cultivate like kind of a healthier version of that? And that's open to anyone.
Tell me about the end of the slippery slope.
Well, a lot of his friends don't have that desire. They're just, I feel like when they game, they're just doing like the drool kind of gaming that you guys were talking about. I mean, don't get me wrong. He's invited me to play Battlefront, and that's actually kind of fun. But
yeah.
And like he and I will have some mom time. It's like very, very low that I'll go in there and, do some sniping. But for him with his friends, he doesn't really fit the mold of what they're all doing. But again, he's only 12. So is the day going to come where the interest of him actually kind of getting his mind around how buildings would work on a 3D kind of scope will change to just the mind numbing, and how would I not correct it, but just gear it toward the beneficial side?
Love it. Two things. One is don't deny play as play, right? That's fun. And like you said, that game, this game's fun or whatever. And for that, I'd give you this analogy, and I think you already would know what to do. Let's assume that you have a 12-year-old who knows how to take a bike apart and reassemble it. And he gets into it, geeky about it. And he knows what alloys are used for different ones and why they're better. And he has a bunch of friends who ride whatever it is that their parents bought them, and they go riding a lot. And where they're riding is not for exercise or any utility whatsoever. It's just mindless riding. We just go ride. What would you say to yourself if you say, well, I'm worried that he ends up just going down mindless stuff and doing this with his friends and not following that natural talent that I've noticed and interest, because he also can disassemble his bike, and that's geeky and unique.
I guess there's just balance on it.
I think so. I think it's awesome to know that it's fun, right? And then it's fun for other people. He might look at that and say, I could make all their bikes better one day. Or one day he might look back and say, remember those kids I rode with? I want to make a bike for them. In the same way that he might have fond memories of gaming and think, I'm going to make a great game. I'm going to do it. I'm going to go for it. So the second part of the answer is, I think, just making sure you're opening the door where you can for his natural interests and inclinations. And we as parents always want to open more doors than we possibly can, and more than our child can walk through, which is why that play element is so important, because you want it to be the fun door that he also has positive attachment with, not just the nose to the grind door, right? But I think that means let's find another person who also is coding a game and see if you can get involved. Let's plot a path to that internship as he grows up, or go tour. I'm in Austin, so Blizzard Entertainment's here. Let's go like literally easy. Call a product manager at Blizzard and say, my 12-year-old kid loves games. Can he come talk to your game developers? They'd be totally down for that, right? If you make some steps like that, 1 or 2 a year, I think that adds to the likelihood that he also pursues his interest, and maybe is like, and engineers are cool when they do bridges and airplanes and whatever that's not gaming too. Let me see what that's about.
Try to find him like a CAD system, like just a cheap one, because they get expensive out there. But it's like basically a program where you can make like 3D dimensional designs and stuff like that. Like you could actually build something. I've seen whole machines built on this CAD system before, and those are the expensive ones. But I've actually found one that was like 360 something that I was just messing around with to create some dog kennels that I had an idea about, and it helped me design it. So it's, get him to just mess around with that just for like a minute or so, or see if he's interested in it as well.
That's cool. And I'm not ashamed. This is probably controversial, but I'm not ashamed to say kids like money, and it'd be cool if they got paid for what they're interested in the future life. So if you can come up with an engineering problem in your home that you actually have, and be like, I literally need this shelf built and I need it to work like this, and I need you to figure it out, and I'll pay you $50 when you do it, or whatever is the right number. That's pretty cool, right? Like, make me redesign this room in our house using CAD software on our iPad. I want 3 ideas. I'll pay you $15 per idea. That kind of thing, I think, is I personally am like, when a kid sees that they can have fun making money, that's a really good connection to create.
That's cool.
Just to back up on that, if I can as well for you, Amy, I do have experience doing mechanical engineering and stuff. The program they're referring to is AutoCAD. They have free subscriptions on their website. You can go to, you just enter an email, and typically it's like a 1-year free subscription that you can get to that software. It is kind of limited, but there's a lot of stuff that you can access. The other aspect too is, between those 2 career fields, there is a ton of overlap on the skills. So at this point in time, being 12, neither one of them is really something that you could steer necessarily toward, because they both require a lot of the same skills that could be learned by playing some of those video games or everything like that. As far as, you're going to have to know some form of engineering if you're going to be building video games and such like that. Whereas, if you're looking more towards mechanical engineering, there's still things you can figure out by playing video games, as far as how certain things work with each other, especially depending on the game that you're using as well to develop that skill.
Yeah, thank you. And I think that's kind of where I've been struggling, of like screen limit time, because he uses it appropriately, but it's just like another question that we all have: safety and time spent.
Cool. Go ahead.
One more thing. Just Microsoft sometimes has these events that I actually went to just because it kind of piqued my interest of like just coding. And I met this kid when I was in high school, and he made a game with his dad. Like he engineered a game with his dad and he made it all working and stuff like that. It was all like, block figures, but that was like really cool to even see like a younger kid develop this game and wanting to go into the gaming world. And that's where he kind of started out. So like with I don't know when they are. I only been to it once, but and I'm not even sure how to get that information, but I do know that Microsoft actually has those like get-togethers to kind of go to and just to see about like the coding aspect of things.
Well, I think we have spent a fair amount of time on this. Rick, are you still with us?
Yeah, I'm still here.
You want to wrap it up?
Yeah, we can do that. Sounds good.
Sweet.
So that was actually pretty awesome. I love this. I thought this was really fun. And Isaiah, hats off to you. Super excited to be able to have another warrior take the center stage. And so this was a very different experience for us to do. And I really liked it. I thought this was awesome. So thank you guys. This is it was good too. This is also the first time we mixed warriors together. So we had the guys and the girl warriors mixed together here. And so this is kind of cool.
Good job on language, guys. Good job.
It's also good to see too that we're all one big team here, especially in the Warriors way. We all look out for each other. We all want each other to succeed, and you can see there's also healthy versions of the conversation that come from both men and women. So a lot of times we get caught up in the outside world and don't realize that there's a whole group of us internally who are also trying to have healthy communication and grow and look out for each other and help each other's families, help each other's kids. And so thank you so much, Isaiah, for spearheading today to help us just have just a leg up on looking out for our little ones, because this world is working its best to try, like you said. I really like this. I have some good takeaways from what you said with these dang phones. These are tools. These aren't toys. And then how can we make it so that the opposite of depression is play? How do we make it so this outside world is for us is more play and more fun for our kids? So there's a lot more competency and a lot more tools that we're going to be using. So thank you for these new tools, man. I really appreciate it. So as always, I honor all my warriors. Thank you, Isaiah. I honor you, and I honor all of you who have put in the work today. Thank you guys so much. And we'll do another one like this if somebody else has another topic or another expertise that they're like, I want to try and help the group be stronger. We'll put together more of these in the future. But this was the first run, and I thought this was very successful. So thank you very much, guys. And thank you, Isaiah.
Cool. Thank you, everyone.
All right. Good night, everybody.